Welcome to Resistant AI's event series, where we will arm you with the knowledge you need to fight today's increasingly sophisticated financial criminals.
Welcome everybody to this episode in our Bright Talk series. The episode today is entitled "The Bots Are Coming: Robotic Identities and the Future of Financial Crime." And this in fact is the sixth and final episode in our series. And I invite you all to look back over the previous episodes if you haven't attended those already. Just as a reminder, questions can be entered into the panel at the bottom of the screen. And for our episode today, we're really pleased to be joined by Frank Badalamenti, who's principal in the Financial Crimes Unit of PwC. Frank's based in the US. Welcome, Frank. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And we have, as is traditional, Martin Rehak, our CEO here at Resistant AI. Martin is one of our key founders. Prior to starting Resistant in 2019, he'd already co-founded and built Cognitive Security, which later became part of Cisco, so Cisco Cognitive Threat Analytics. Welcome again, Martin.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Thanks for being here. So let's make a start. Frank, perhaps for those people who are not familiar with your role and your organization within PwC, which is, obviously is a very large organization, would you maybe tell us a little bit more about what your unit does?
Yes, James. Yeah, so within PwC, we have a cyber risk and reg platform within our consulting business. And within that, we have a financial crimes unit. So I'm a partner within our financial crimes unit. And what we focus on is helping clients, primarily financial institutions, but also clients across other sectors. We help clients determine how to better prevent, detect, and respond to fraud and other financial crime risks. And we do that through a variety of consulting services end to end, from program assessment to operating model assessment to risk assessment. We help evaluate and test controls, tune and optimize detection scenarios, optimize their investigative case management systems and workflow. And we also provide managed services where we provide assistance in the alert review and dispositioning process as well. So pretty comprehensive set of offerings for clients who are looking to mitigate their risk of financial crime.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Very interesting and very end-to-end as well. I mean, as well as doing the consulting part, as you mentioned, you're providing outsourced services as well. That's really interesting. Great. So as an overriding theme, and reflecting a little bit on some of the other episodes that we've had in this series, so we looked at artificial intelligence, we've looked at specific topics such as KYC, we looked at how the more recent innovations in neo-finance, so buy now, pay later and things like that, are relevant and specifically from a financial crime point of view. So as that overriding theme, Frank, it seems to me that the threat to financial systems at present has never been greater, never been so severe. And talking about the threat that's coming from, scaled and automated cybercrime, is that something you would agree with, Frank, and maybe help us reflect on?
Yeah, absolutely, James. I would definitely agree with that. I think the technological sophistication among the fraud community is definitely increasing. Much greater use of bots and automation and machine learning techniques to probe and reverse engineer and exploit control vulnerabilities within systems. I believe the pandemic has also contributed, given much less face-to-face interaction between consumers and banks and retailers and things of that nature, opening up the door for more cyber-enabled crimes, I would say. So I absolutely agree with your statement.
Yeah, I think we've all seen, through any number of sort of content coming out recently that what's happened in the last couple of years has only made things worse. It's actually presented the opportunity to the fraudsters, to the cyber criminals. Martin, from your point of view, is that something that resonates with you? It's something you've seen in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, we see nothing but this in the business because we specialize in dealing with digital fraud and high-speed financial crime. And I call it high-speed financial crime because that's one of the big changes. Essentially, during COVID and even before, finance went from default face-to-face and default slow to default digital and default high-speed. And that's something that changed the fraud landscape dramatically. Fraud is happening in seconds and not days anymore. It's happening in an automated way. And once the fraudsters find a weakness, they can exploit this 1,000 times per second. And this is dramatically changing the whole landscape. So something that used to be more of a backwater 5 years ago is now very hot because the potential of fraud is to destroy many fintech companies.
And just to expand on that a little bit, Martin, so talking about fintech, talking about, let's say, new ways of doing business, which we've all been, or many of us have been pushed towards adopting, or if we hadn't already done so recently. Do you think that as well as seeing that scaled attack level, we're also seeing more complicated scams? So I know we were talking with Frank earlier in preparation about some of the, well, crypto is always mentioned. I think there were some recent attacks even this last few days where what purported to be stable cryptocurrencies actually had been taken over and then emptied in what seemed to be quite complex scams. Frank, is that something that you're seeing from in your work with PwC?
Yeah, absolutely. We're starting to get more involved in advising companies in the digital asset space, and the schemes you're referring to are sort of loosely referred to as 51% attacks, and so that's where attackers are able to gain control of the majority of the nodes in a decentralized network, which are effectively voting rights. So once they're able to compromise those nodes, either through sophisticated attacks or by temporarily providing enough funds into the system to be able to acquire those nodes, then they can raise a proposal to transfer funds out, and effectively they've got a majority vote, and none of the other node operators or community members can really do anything to stop it. And so that has actually happened at least a couple times over the last few weeks, and it sort of exposes a design flaw in some of these decentralized networks where you really need to have a significant number of nodes in the system to avert the possibility of this 51% attack.
And those technically were legal operations, even if the end result for the cryptocurrency was clearly not desirable. Is that correct? It was taking advantage of what you might call design flaws in their platforms.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the legalities of it. I mean, there's definitely fraudulent intent, from the very beginning to drain funds from the system. But I guess what you can say is that they leveraged available, options and features within the system that allowed them to do what they did, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. Rather than being a hack or someone breaching security, it's actually taking advantage of the way these systems have been designed, even though the intent, as you said, was fraudulent.
And I think it all goes back to the need to sort of look at fraud by design when prior to rolling out any new financial products and services, whether it's in a centralized financial services provider or a decentralized platform. Often there may not be enough time spent to do a proper risk assessment, understand all of the different exploits that could potentially be there, and then work through an appropriate control structure to prevent those exploits from occurring.
Sure. Got it.
Which is actually,
Go on, Martin.
that's a fascinating point. Like Frank just made a great point about that, because when you deploy a new IT system, typically in a big company, you have to go through a checklist of about 700 pages of documentation, like going after different scenarios of what can go wrong on the technical level. But today, people can and do deploy financial services that are completely new, relying on data from other organizations and other subjects, and they don't go through the checklist, or sometimes like intentionally, sometimes not. And to some extent, it's a golden age of financial services because of that, because we can see plenty of new services appearing on the market that didn't exist a year ago. On the other hand, we see so much new fraud because of the same thing.
No, that's a good point, Martin. I think that you mentioned the golden age there. It seems to be a golden age as well for those who are working on the other side, so the dark side, for the fraudsters, the cyber criminals. And one of those attacks I was reading about, I think just early April, was that it actually took place in end to end in about 10 seconds, which is actually quite astonishing. The benefit that can be obtained with clearly some complex setup, but actually executed in a few seconds. And Martin, back to yourself. We've heard a little bit about current trends and where we've gone in the last couple of years, maybe. How do you think organizations are even beginning to face down this level of threat? This highly scaled, automated threat from cyber criminals. What do we have to do to fight back?
I think we have to change our approach. Right now, most of the anti-fraud is reactive. someone loses plenty of money or sees their neighbor lose plenty of money, and they start getting interested and they start investing into resilience. It needs to be the other way around. It needs to be something that's part of the design process. You have to think through the risks about the intentions of the other people who try to steal the money, who try to attack, and who try to launder money using your service. The interesting phenomena we have seen already this year and last year, but we expect more of, is the financial crime and fraud going across the fiat and crypto boundaries. So you steal something in the fiat world, you get it to crypto, you get it back to fiat, and suddenly it's a new clean money. And you can keep going back and forth, and you can basically amplify the attacks. So we expect to some extent to see amplification attacks where you steal some money, you use them to create a semblance of business, you do some money laundering, which creates more business, and then you use this to steal some more money by applying for loans and so on. And all of that can be automated very easily now.
Thanks, Martin. So back to Frank for a second. I mean, are those themes that within your unit, within the financial crimes unit in PwC, that you're seeing? Are you seeing that switch to not so much the fraudsters having kind of up their game, but are your customers or our customers, is society responding with the same speed, the same reactivity? How do you see it right now?
Well, we're definitely monitoring things, and what Martin says is definitely the case, where the ability to combine different financial products and services together, to kind of obfuscate the trail of funds is definitely something that we're seeing and helping our clients mitigate the risk of. Some of the challenges are, within a financial institution, they can only really see from a transactional level what occurs within their own financial institution. And so when funds leave and get transferred, let's say, to another bank and then come back, they do lose a little bit of the trail of what happens in between. Good thing about crypto is you can monitor what happens on chain once funds leave an institution as part of a fiat on-ramp onto let's say, a crypto exchange, through the use of blockchain forensic tools. And so there is a little bit more transparency there, but it does take some skill and proficiency to be able to make use of that data, understand the various risk indicators, follow the flow of funds. Fraudsters have also been known to use sort of cross-chain bridges, right, to move tokens or assets from one blockchain to another, put them through sort of, tumblers or services that will mix funds going into a particular sort of transaction and out the other end, where you have multiple participants participating at the same time. And it becomes very difficult to see which of the exited funds belongs to which of the entrants in the mixer. And so these techniques will continue to be used as a way to sort of deflect investigators. And there needs to be more innovation on the side of the fraud prevention and detection teams to work through these challenges and be able to follow the trail more effectively. But our clients are increasingly asking about methods for understanding where funds from deposit institutions are going when they enter into the crypto world, and tools and techniques for monitoring that traffic and understanding any risk exposure related to their bank customers once those funds have left and are being used in the crypto ecosystem.
And I think that's a really good example of the need for organizations, so financial services organizations, to keep pace, because you've used some really good examples there of the criminals taking advantage of new tech, and recent tech is perhaps not so new anymore. Martin, to come back to yourself, one of the themes we wanted to cover today was why we need to have adaptive risk mitigation strategies. How do we know what to do next when we kind of are struggling to see what's happening or haven't seen it before? So perhaps we used a model on past behavior. What are we doing here in Resistant? What is the community doing in terms of being able to deal with this threat in a more adaptive way?
I think a key to adaptivity is the ability to discover the new attacks very soon. And this is the main competence of Resistant. And The thesis we have is the one that there is always a way how to get through any kind of security, because it's never perfect. What we try to achieve is that we will find this kind of vulnerability very soon, and we will address that very quickly as soon as it's used by the first few people. And then we can catch all of the others. And once we catch all of the others, we can follow the traces, and we can find more of the new and interesting behavior. So many people are to some extent suspicious of the AI automation in terms of finding new threats, because by definition it's very hard. But actually it works better than humans, because we can follow almost infinite amount of leads. We can act on very weak suspicions, and we can keep confirming them or disproving them automatically. And that's something that's super useful in anti-money laundering scenarios where you need this kind of creativity, because that's the area where the escalation warfare, I would call it, is the fastest. You stop something, it's immediately obvious to the other side they lost the money. And they need to change their ways to keep laundering money and to keep them to themselves. So we have to get better, they get better, and we see very quick pace of innovation in that field.
So it's almost like competing innovations. And when you, I think you were hinting on the need to use different layers of protection that almost any system can be defeated with enough time and effort. Is that critical to what we do? I mean, and when we're talking about things we've never seen before, is that where technologies such as anomaly detection, can be brought to bear?
Yeah, that's a critical component, because if you look at the current financial systems, they need to be frictionless. You need to be able to provide service to your customers very easily. You shouldn't ask them to give you 200 pages of written documentation, because first, they don't want to do that, and second, you don't want to read that. So you want to do things in a more scalable way. You get the data from third parties to achieve that, but then all of the mistakes in the third parties' data became your vulnerabilities. So suddenly, you get some data in the best effort. It works for most people, but it doesn't work for the fraudsters. And they find the gaps, and they go explicitly after those gaps to exploit them. And that's how they innovate, and that's how they find basically creativity. And you can't really control that, because the choice is really, I stop being convenient and easy to use and you lose in the marketplace. Or the other choice is, I will take this risk on, and when I see someone getting through, I will react very quickly. And that is the right way.
Got it. In fact, that was one of the themes we touched on, I think, on our previous session, around Buy Now Pay Later, BNPL, was trying to get that balance right between detection and customer experience, which has long been a challenge in fraud prevention. Frank, back to yourself. How are you seeing with your engagement with your customers the perception around artificial intelligence? Is it still treated with some skepticism? Is it being more widely adopted? Are there questions around how explainable it may be? What's the view from PwC on this?
Yeah, so the use of AI and machine learning for financial crime detection is definitely on the rise and increasing in usage over time. It also depends on whether you're talking about fraud or anti-money laundering, right? So machine learning has been used for a very long time in fraud, and that industry is very comfortable with using models, various kinds of models, supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised models, to drive detection, at various stages in the customer life cycle, primarily at the account opening stage, right? Also to detect account takeovers and transaction fraud. So that's been around for a while. The community's, fairly comfortable with the knowing how much explainability to provide, to internal auditors, regulatory examiners, things of that nature, going through the model risk governance process, model validation process, and defending the models. On the AML side, it's traditionally been a little bit more rules-based traditionally, but we are seeing clients innovate there and begin to use machine learning models, either for alert processing, post-alert generation processing of the alerts to prioritize and rank the the productivity or usefulness of those alerts, and even on the detection side up front. That community is a little bit slower to adapt, just because of the need to work with the regulators and get the regulators comfortable with the approach being used, and to sort of make the case that there aren't any productive or useful alerts being lost in the process of transitioning from a primarily rules-based system to a machine learning-based system, and so needing to provide ample evidence of that fact. But absolutely, the use of AI is definitely on the upswing, and it'll continue to move in that direction.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, I completely agree. I think the difference between AI being used for fraud prevention, which is where it's more established, and let's say a greener field or a more recent adoption in financial crime compliance or AML is clear. It's something we're certainly seeing in Resistant. Martin, back to yourself. Frank touched on a point that I wanted to raise with you, and we've covered in previous sessions actually. The where to use human insight, where to use artificial intelligence, and I think certainly in AML, there's a need for both. Could you maybe enlighten us a little bit around that as well?
Yeah, it's always going to be a mix. So we don't believe that humans will be displaced or removed from the process completely. It's a nonsense. And it can be done technically, but it can be done for a split second before the humans on the other side figure something out. On the other side, we see that AI is getting used more and more by the attackers. So as Frank said, we can have some reservations about the usage of AI and machine learning for AML. But once the attackers and money launderers start to use AI to construct their attacks and their evasions, we have to respond in kind. You can't have people going after automated actions at a rate of a couple of hundreds per second. Simply no humans can do that. There is no way how to do this physically. And this is the point where basically AI is going to take over, and the human is going to step up on top of the loop. So they will be there to supervise, to control, and to provide guidance, but they shouldn't be involved in high-speed event processing. That's not a role for a human.
Good, thanks, Martin. So high-speed processing. One of the final topics we wanted to cover was looking at how that is critical when you're trying to cut through the noise of fake identities that a lot of our customers, sort of financial services organizations, are facing. Just how critical is it there to use those high speed defenses, Martin? We're talking here about customers wishing to onboard new customers, new consumers. Buy now, pay later, good example. Is there a real challenge there, getting that balance right between low friction customer experience and detection?
Absolutely. The first rule is don't lose legitimate customers. Don't make it difficult for them. Don't ask them for 50 documents instead of one, because simply you can't catch some fraudsters. So this is what we need technology for, and that's the kind of service we provide. The second rule we have is you have to catch the fraudsters, meaning you have to be smart, you have to be adaptive, you have to learn how they are learning, and you have to be on top of their approach. Because the modern criminal gangs are not criminal gangs of yesterday. They are essentially startups. They just have a different kind of sales force. And what we keep observing is that they really innovate on daily timescales. So we see something on Tuesday, we react, and on Thursday we have a different kind of attack, getting around the reaction we provide. And the global scale we have and the visibility into the identity documents, bank statements, and all other kinds of documents used in the onboarding shows that pace is getting faster and faster by day.
So highly automated, highly sophisticated attacks. Frank, is that something you're seeing a shift towards as well? Whereas perhaps in the past, bots might be engaged to carry out things such as credential stuffing, kind of using structured data. Are you seeing a shift towards more intelligent bots, more focused social engineering challenges managed by those kind of automated systems?
Well, we're definitely seeing a focus on the new account opening stage of the customer life cycle in terms of both where the fraudsters are going and where the financial institutions are spending more time trying to bolster their defenses and their detection capabilities. There's so many things that could occur that are negative post account opening, in terms of like mule accounts and sleeper accounts and sort of credit schemes that effectively become credit bust out schemes, many months down the line. Creating and harvesting and sort of curating synthetic identities in order to build a larger credit history and therefore a larger credit line to then maybe use at another financial institution. So it's very critical to stop those malicious intent scenarios from the very beginning, from the initial account opening attempt. And so that's where more investments in machine learning and document forgery detection and digital identity verification are coming into play. A number of third-party service providers and vendors have emerged, that are focusing on digital ID verification and risk detection. And so that is sort of viewed as critical. I mean, I don't have the specific stats in front of me, but a significant proportion of total fraud losses incurred in financial services can be sort of attributed to what we would call new account opening fraud, where there was malicious intent from the very beginning. It wasn't an account takeover. It wasn't a matter of individuals somehow harvesting payment card or bank account information from a data breach. It was they intended to open up an account at a financial institution for the sole purpose of committing fraud. And then in terms of, you mentioned social engineering, James, we are seeing an increase in fraud schemes targeting the customer directly as opposed to the financial institution. So effectively scams, business email compromise, CEO fraud type schemes, both within the traditional banking community as well as in crypto, where bots and other leverage techniques are being used to send rather convincing looking messages to customers, through SMS, through chat, sort of applications like Telegram and Discord and WhatsApp. Email has obviously been around for a while, but it's becoming easier, or they're finding more effective ways to basically impersonate other individuals that the customers already know. So it could be a friend, a family member, it could be the administrator of a Discord channel, or the owner of a Web3 community. And so they are led to believe that it's really that person contacting them, asking for a favor, asking them to click on a link, asking them to lend them, something, and it's definitely becoming an effective technique for fraudsters to use on the social engineering front.
No, it's really interesting, Frank. In fact, we were having a debate, a little bit of a debate here internally the other day about whether the more digitally savvy age groups were less or more susceptible to fraud. And personally, my view was, well, the fraudsters will find the way to defraud pretty much any age group. So you might want to target older people because they have more to take away, to steal from them. But the challenges you've mentioned, Discord, Telegram, these kind of things, which are used perhaps by younger generations, the fraudsters are all going to find a way there. Celebrity promotions of we've seen that as well, and all it takes often is just one click on a link to be scammed, to be duped into carrying out what the fraudsters want to do. Very interesting. Yeah, go on. Did you have another point?
No, I was going to say just one thing that seems to be exacerbating the use of the social engineering scams when it comes to the crypto world, when you talk about things like NFTs and other digital assets, is there is this sort of sense of urgency where a lot of the profit making possibility really depends on getting in on those projects early and being part of the initial release, initial mint of these projects, where you have the greatest upside. So because the time is very fleeting and it's so important to get in as soon as possible, individuals receiving these messages are more likely to act upon them because they perceive that this is their way of getting in, at the onset and maximizing their profit. And so the fraudsters are exploiting that sort of fleeting time element of the situation. Yeah.
I think that you could call that the FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great term.
Yeah. Not sure if you heard it here first, but I think that's kind of what we're talking about, isn't it? No, very interesting. Thanks, Frank. One of the words I had in my head whilst we were going through this session was a holistic approach. Being able to, or being obliged to take a sort of enterprise view or end-to-end view of everything that's going inside your business, because the risks and the possible scams, the possible ways to be defrauded or to be not compliant from an AML point of view are multiple. Just as we come to a close here, I wanted to touch on something we've been doing recently with between both our organizations, and which is actually a ACAMS sponsored hackathon. Going to ask Martin if he'd tell us a little bit more about that. It was related to crunching a lot of data relating to human trafficking. I think it's a really good example of the ways that you need to be reacting to some fast moving and quite complex, in this case, financial crime scenarios. Martin?
Yeah, it was a great opportunity. It was ACAMS Hackathon, managed and sponsored by PwC. So thanks, Frank. And we enjoy doing that because human trafficking has been one of the oldest crimes. It has been around for thousands of years. But it is also changing because the way how you can pay for things, how you can organize things, how you can deal with the logistics of that discussed in business is really changing and transforming. So our algorithms go after those changes, and we understand that this is going to stick out in the data, but we also understand that we can't pick up everything. And the example we use, or the approach we use, is called defense in depth. So we want to catch one of the hot links first. We want to catch something that's kind of raising our suspicion. And then our system goes and investigates other aspects of that identity, of that personality, of that account from other angles. And we catch up the network and we exploit. So we essentially automate the action of the human forensics investigator. And the advantage of the automation is that we can investigate thousands of cases and suspicions instead of a handful per day, which means we can catch and react to very weak signals and stop the damage before it becomes catastrophic. And that's how we succeeded in the hackathon, because we picked on some very small signals initially, and suddenly the whole network popped up in the data.
And Martin, just to dive in a little bit deeper, I think we were looking at about 1 million pieces of data in a short period, weren't we? And the signals you mentioned, they were things like payments to book travel tickets, payments to request visas, travel documents, people being put on trains to be moved around. It's that kind of data. I mean, we weren't sitting at borders looking for people being trafficked, were we? We were looking at you could almost call it the footprint that those organizations, those unfortunate individuals were leaving. Is that right?
That's right. Like, you can look at this from many angles, but you still have to catch that first clue. And typically transportation is one interesting source of information to look at. The visa fees and the ways, basically administrative fees, are a second interesting potential hotspot. The way how the money gets into the system, which means exploitation that comes later, is a third opportunity. And those things are basically leads that take us to the whole network. And once you get a network, unraveling that is actually quite simple for the AI.
And certainly a holistic approach to looking across that data set in a very short time and finding those signals. Frank, we really love collaborating with PwC on that and ACAMS. What did you like about that, the hackathon?
Yeah, we really enjoyed putting on the hackathon there. So as a diamond sponsor of ACAMS Hollywood this year, we had the opportunity to sponsor the first ever hackathon. We thought that analyzing human trafficking data was a great use case to work through. We worked to create a synthetic data set that had embedded with it a number of different known human trafficking typologies that sort of emulate the way that funds are spent and then laundered from those activities. We had a great panel of judges representing senior compliance officers from PNC Bank, Citibank, and Coinbase. And we had a number of participants in the hackathon. Some were, vendor solution teams. Some were teams coming from financial institutions, and we even had some mixed teams of individuals that sort of knew each other or found each other at the conference and decided to enter together. And the judges were obviously very impressed with the approach taken by Resistant, and there were some great insights found by all the teams. And it was really great to see, the competitors come together and within a very short period of time, really come up with some compelling insights that they found within the data that could be used to then bolster a control environment further upstream. So thanks to Resistant for participating and putting in a great effort there.
Now, it was a great event, and like hackathons are not about winning. They are about competing, learning from each other, and getting better as a community. And that's the key aspect of that whole event.
Thanks so much, Martin. I think the word we take away from all of that was collaboration, and I think we saw the value through that exercise of collaborating together, organizations, vendors, to try and make things better and try and reduce the impact of some fairly unsavory activities, which are unfortunately part of the world we live in. So that brings us to the end. Thank you so much to Frank and to Martin. Frank, it's a real pleasure to have you here. Hope we can do it again. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. And also to Martin, of course. Thanks, Martin.
Thank you. And thanks to Frank for coming and joining us.
Excellent. So that's the end of this episode, the end of the series. Thank you for everyone who's listened today. Thank you for everyone who's listened during the course of this series. Please check out the previous episodes if you haven't done so already. You can raise questions on this particular episode in the box at the bottom. It's been a real pleasure moderating these. We hope we can do it again really soon. Thank you and take care, everyone.
Thank you for attending. Please visit our Bright Talk channel where you'll find details about our other events. Please be sure to rate this session.